Jasmine Crockett, what happens when a congresswoman with a mouth as filthy as her politics thinks she's untouchable, because that's exactly what's unfolding on Capitol Hill today, where the storm doesn't come from the sky, but from the velvet pumps of one Jasmine Crockett, the junior representative from Texas with more scandals than legislative wins, and one very thick cloud of controversy hanging over her perfectly manicured head. They say Washington, D.C. doesn't sleep, but this morning it held its breath. The Capitol complex stirred under a strange kind of tension. Not the usual bustle of bureaucrats and lobbyists know this was different. Heavier cameras were being mounted with a kind of urgency. Reporters shuffled like predators waiting for blood in the water. The metal detectors buzzed nonstop as security tripled around one named Crockett, and right in the middle of that storm, like a ghost walking through smoke, Pam Bondi appeared. No entourage, no flashy speech, just her a sharp navy blazer and a thick black folder tucked tightly under one arm. The words Tesla files faintly visible beneath the seal. People noticed, not because she tried to be seen, but because there's something unsettling about calm in the middle of chaos. Whispers echoed through the marble halls. Is she really going to go after Crockett today? They say she's got something real bad. Pam doesn't show up unless there's blood on the table. And oh, there would be blood, maybe not literal, not yet, but the kind that stains reputations. Beyond redemption, somewhere between the clattered journalists and the heavy-footed march of Capitol Police, Charles D.S. passed through security, his jaw tight, his camera bag zipped. He didn't smile. He wasn't here for a scoop. He was here for accountability, the kind that leaves bruises or ethics complaints behind him. Was Laura Loomer, who needed no introduction. Firebrand crusader, unfiltered like strong whiskey. She wore her anger like a badge, and today she had receipts as the hearing chamber filled. The air got colder. Some called it anticipation, others called it fear. But we know better. It's the chill of truth creeping into a place where lies have long sat too comfortably. A congressional hearing is supposed to begin with decorum. This one began with dread. The gavel struck. Once in the chamber swollen with anticipation, fell into silence. This committee convenes today to examine serious ethical concerns regarding the conduct of Representative Jasmine Crockett, stemming from alleged physical altercations with the press and inflammatory public remarks that may have endangered public safety, declared the chair, his voice carrying the weight of man who'd rather be anywhere else but exactly here. The room didn't exhale. It braced. All eyes shifted to the two women seated opposite each other. The clash that everyone had come for. One came armed with documents, the other with drama. Pam Bondi, as immovable as a stone column in a hurricane, adjusted her blazer with the calm precision of someone about to dismantle a career. No theatrics, just presence, authority distilled. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, was all charged, static, bouncing one leg beneath the table, hair razor-sharp, expression already daring anyone to blink. First Pam met her eyes, a pause of silence, then the politest shot fired in political warfare. "Good morning, Representative," Pam said with all the warmth of a courtroom subpoena. Crockett smiled, the kind of smile that comes just before a scandal breaks. Well, Pam Bondi in the flesh thought you'd be too busy filing lawsuits for your boss back in Florida. Pam didn't react, didn't need to. She just tapped the folder in front of her. Once a soft sound, but it landed like a drum roll. "I came here for facts, not fiction, but I suppose we'll be hearing both today." And with that, the chair gestured to Representative Crockett. "Congresswoman, the floor is yours." Jasmine Crockett rose, like she was stepping onto a stage sheet. Built herself, she began as expected, not with humility nor apology, but with fire and fury wrapped in the same old storyline. Let's not waste time pretending this is about ethics. This is about a coordinated smear campaign against a strong black woman who refuses to bow to billionaires, bots, and bad faith bullies. There was the victim monologue delivered with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it in the mirror. "Maybe twice I've been followed, harassed, filmed without my consent by so-called reporters who serve no one but the radical right wing elite. Charles D.S., please, he's not a journalist, he's a stalker with a camera." She turned briefly and dramatically to Charles in the audience, who remained still, unblinking, camera resting quietly in his lap. "I acted in self-defense, period, and I'd do it again if another sleazebag tried to violate my space." She waved her hand dismissively toward the press gallery, her gold bangles clinking like alarm bells. Then came the turn of her usual list of punching bags. Elon Musk, a billionaire baby with a Wi-Fi fetish. Laura Loomer, a conspiracy theorist cosplaying as a crusader. Fox News The propaganda arm of fear and fascism dressed in American flag graphics, the chamber, stirred. Someone scoffed. A few exchanged glances that said, "Did she really just say that?" But Jasmine was far from done. She slammed her palm on the table hard, leaned forward like a prosecutor arguing with her own ego, and stared directly at Pam Bondi. "You want to drag me in here like I'm some criminal? I'm not afraid of you, Pam. Not now. Not ever." A beat. A few polite claps came from her side of the aisle, the kind of applause usually reserved for kindergarten recital or charity auctions where people feel obligated to support something mediocre. And just like that, Jasmine Crockett sat back in her chair, satisfied, unaware she had just served herself on a silver platter. Pam didn't respond. She didn't have to, because when someone performs that loudly, it's usually to cover up just how terrified they are of what's coming next. And Bondi, she didn't come to talk. She came to show, and the folder in front of her was about to speak volumes. And then just when Jasmine Crockett believed her mic drop moment had landed, Pam Bondi blinked. Once, without saying a word, she opened her folder casually as if she were about to pay a bill, not detonate a bomb. Her thumb tapped a small remote, and behind her the screen crackled to life. No dramatics, no commentary, no setup, just video. Grainy but unmistakable play. Crockett, very much not under duress, lunged forward like a suburban Karen spotting the last clearance purse at Nordstrom rack. Her hand gripped the camera of reporter Charles D.S. Her voice raised, her tone not the kind you associate with civil discourse. Her actions, well, ask the First Amendment how it felt on screen. The footage rolled with grainy clarity, and the room filled with the unmistakable sharpness of Crockett's voice. "Get that damn thing out of my face, you little creep. You think this is funny? You want to record me? Huh? Say that again. I dare you." The camera wobbled violently as she swatted at her earrings, catching the light mid-swing. "You're lucky I don't knock that smug look off your face. You don't know who you're messing with." Cut the room. Didn't need to gasp. It needed only to watch Pam lean back, arms gently crossed, her eyes scanned the room. She said nothing at first, but then just as the screen faded to black, she finally spoke. "I believe the phrase is in her own words, but I suppose in this case, in her own hands might be more appropriate." A quiet ripple went through the room, not laughter, but that brittle edge of shock that comes when someone cuts clean through the noise with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. Crockett shot out her chair. All pretense gone. That is a doctored clip spliced and edited by propaganda outlets trying to make me look bad. Pam raised a brow, no smirk, just clinical interest. "Congresswoman, I don't think it takes propaganda to make you look bad. You seem to have that part covered." Crockett pointed furiously toward Charles D.S. in the back row, her voice turning shrill. "He was harassing me. I had every right to protect myself." Pam didn't blink again for what the tyranny of question. Crockett's hand slammed against the desk. "This is what happens when a black woman dares to speak truth to power." Pam tilted her head slightly the way one might when examining a bug under glass. "Or maybe it's just what happens when someone confuses power with performance." The chair rapped his gavel once, twice firm and irritated. "Representative Crockett, you'll maintain order or forfeit your time." But Jasmine wasn't about to let decorum ruin her moment. "This entire hearing is a political witch hunt. You people don't care about truth. You care about tearing down someone who doesn't bow to your billionaire donors." There was the script, the go-to playbook. When the facts don't cooperate, scream oppression, blame the patriarchy, and pray no one notices the irony of doing so while holding elected office and national attention. Pam waited for the dust to settle, then almost conversationally, "Congresswoman, no one here is silencing you. In fact, that's half the problem." And with that, she folded her hands. The screen was dark again, but the image remained burned into the minds of everyone in the room. Because Crockett didn't just lose control, she lost the narrative. She'd handed Bondi the first applause, not of approval, but of confirmation, a silent clap for fact, for video, from truth. And the gallery, it wasn't leaning forward anymore, it was starting to lean away. The hearing room still echoing faintly from the video footage of Crockett's high-definition tantrum hadn't yet settled when another voice cut through the static. This time, it wasn't Bondi, it was Laura Loomer, uninvited, but certainly not unwelcome, rising from the gallery like a conservative phoenix with a USB stick full of reckoning. "Mr. Chairman," she said, holding up a tablet, "with your permission, I have footage from a public event last week in Texas where Representative Crockett made some curious remarks." The chairman hesitated, not because he doubted the relevance, but because he knew exactly where this train was headed. "Proceed." He side-click play there projected for all to see was Jasmine Crockett on a stage microphone in hand surrounded by supporters who either didn't know better or didn't care. Her voice rang out clear and crisp like a warning dressed as a joke. Look, I don't want flowers. I don't want gifts. All I want for my birthday is to see Elon Musk taken down for real. That would make my day. The crowd laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that says, ha, she's being silly. It was the kind that says, wait, did she just say that? Crockett leaned into the mic with a smile that could cut steel. For real, y'all, that would be the best damn gift. Silence followed, not from the video, from the room. Watching it, Pam Bondi didn't jump, and she didn't need to. Crockett, still nursing the bruises of her previous outburst, exhaled with exaggerated exhaustion. Oh, come on, that was a joke, a birthday joke. I mean, who hasn't said something crazy on their birthday? She smiled, but it didn't land. No one smiled back. Pam finally leaned forward, tone light as a feather, but with the sharpness of a switchblade. Well then, Congresswoman, I suppose it's just another birthday coincidence that the Tesla facility in Austin caught fire that very night. You could almost hear the oxygen evacuate the room, a soft shuffle of papers, a throat being clear, the unspoken scream of, oh no, she didn't. Crockett's lips parted, but her defense came slower this time. That's ridiculous. You can't tie my words to what someone else did. Pam nodded, eyes never leaving hers. Number? Of course not. Words are harmless until they're not. And there was that line dropped like a scalpel, not a hammer, a slice. So clean, so quiet it didn't bleed right away. But it cut, because even if you believe in coincidences, how many does it take before you start believing in consequences? By now, even the potted plants in the hearing room knew something wasn't right. Pam Bondi flipped to the next page in her folder, and somewhere in Washington, a PR team for Tesla started sweating through there. Chinos, Mr. Chairman, she said, adjusting nothing but the national mood. I submit into evidence a field report from the FBI and the Texas Department of Public Safety regarding a fire at the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin, March 29th, the same night Representative Crockett made her now celebrated birthday, wishes staff her passed her a flash drive, like it was radioactive, also included a 911 transcript, eyewitness accounts, photos from the scene, and the findings of an arson investigator who used the words accelerants, deliberate ignition, and my personal favorite, coordinated timing. Then she pressed play. Footage flickered onto the screen. No cinematic filter, no soundtrack. Just real-time wreckage, steel frames twisted like cheap plastic, smoke columns rising like something biblical. This wasn't vandalism. It was an inferno. A voice from a 911 call, piped and ragged and panicked. It's the Tesla place. I heard Musk going down, and then boom, there's fire everywhere there. It was not a metaphor, not a meme. Just combustion, potentially from people who took Jasmine Crockett's words like a call to arms and a box of matches. She scoffed loud enough to make sure everyone knew she wasn't even slightly impressed. Let me guess now, you think my birthday party turned into a terror plot. This is a joke, right? She laughed. It sounded like broken glass in a blender. You're seriously trying to say that I caused this because I cracked a joke about Elon Musk? Y'all ever heard of free speech? Pam responded without turning her head, almost like she was speaking through a side channel to God. Freedom of speech isn't freedom from consequences, especially when your idea of a punchline is someone else's livelihood going up in smoke. Crockett rolled her eyes so hard the gallery could have used them as ceiling fans. Please, I see what this is, a bunch of white conservatives trying to paint me as some kind of black radical fire starter. It's tired, it's racist, and it's insulting to even pretend this has anything to do with me. She leaned back, arms folded, smug, as if race baiting was a fire extinguisher. Pam turned slowly, deliberately, then said the one thing that couldn't be undone. Congresswoman, if you're innocent, why do you keep trying to change the subject? Boom, no flames. Just that Bondi didn't raise her voice, didn't even uncross her arms, because she didn't need to sound powerful. She had facts, doing push-ups in the background. Crockett opened her mouth again, but her timing was off. The room wasn't with her. Even the self-conscious chuckle from her aide landed with all the grace of a wet balloon. And then the kill shot didn't come from Bondi. It came from across the panel, a moderate independent with the charisma of unbuttered toast and the moral clarity of a first-year ethics professor. Representative Crockett, he asked, squinting at his notes, do you believe that elected officials bear any level of ethical responsibility for the impact of their words? Not a gotcha. Worse, it was earnest, and earnestness in politics is More dangerous than any prosecutor. Crockett blinked, then blinked again, then said nothing useful, because you can tweet your way through controversy and yell your way through headlines, but you can't bluff your way through accountability. By this point, Jasmine Crockett had already dodged responsibility like it was jury duty, but Bondi wasn't done with her, not even close. Pam picked up a slim sheet of paper, the kind that doesn't look dangerous until it's read aloud. "Let the record reflect," she said evenly, that Representative Crockett, in a now circulating live stream, made the following statement regarding Senator Ted Cruz, and I quote, "He needs to be knocked over the head, not gently, for real." Pam didn't embellish it, didn't need to, it landed all on its own. Then she turned the page, and later, referring to Governor Greg Abbott, she said again, I quote, "Y'all know Governor Hot Wheels down there. The only thing hot about him is that he's a hot-ass mess." A few members of the committee shifted, not from drama, from disgust. Pam looked up. You can oppose someone's politics without mocking their disability. You can be fierce without being cruel, but clearly some in this chamber have mistaken vulgarity for virtue. The temperature didn't drop, it curdled. Crockett, sensing the blowback, leaned in her mic like she was auditioning for the world's least convincing redemption arc. Okay, let's not act like y'all don't say wild things too. That was just me joking around. That's how we talk, street style. Y'all don't get it. Pam responded, this time not to Crockett, but to the room. Apparently cruelty has a dialect. Now, she turned to face her directly, but her voice stayed flat. "I see. There's nothing bold about mocking a man in a wheelchair. There's nothing brave about wanting to bash someone's head in. And if that's what you consider leadership, I'd hate to see what your definition of disgrace looks like." Crockett laughed, but it came out wrong, a little too loud, a little too desperate. "You're just mad because I don't play nice. I say what people think, that's why I get support." She gestured vaguely toward a few nodding heads in the audience, the kind of nods that disappear the moment cameras pan away. A Democrat on the panel who hadn't spoken all day cleared her throat. Support fades, but words stick. And in that moment, Crockett didn't look like a revolutionary anymore. She looked like someone who mistook a microphone for a megaphone and forgot that volume doesn't equal value. By now, even the backup microphones were regretting being turned on. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just cornered, she was combusting. The entire room had just watched her words from Texas explode in a fire, had heard her gleeful jabs at a disabled governor, her fantasy of violence against a sitting senator. Any other lawmaker would have taken the hint, maybe paused, maybe, God forbid, reflected. But Crockett wasn't wired that way. When the temperature rises, she doesn't step back. She throws gasoline. "You want a circus?" she hissed, voice trembling from somewhere between rage and panic. "Well, congratulations, because that's what this is, a damn circus." She pointed directly at Bondi, finger trembling, with barely contained venom. "You're nothing but a glorified hit woman for Trump, a blonde mannequin with a JD and a mission to protect the regime. That's what this is. Y'all don't care about ethics, you care about optics." Pam didn't even blink, this coming from someone who turned their birthday into a fire hazard. Crockett snapped, "You smug little witch, you sit they're acting all holy like you're not complicit in everything that's broken in this country. Don't talk to me about fires when you helped set the damn house on fire in 2016. Bondi just folded her arms, calm as a judge before the verdict. She didn't need to argue, because Crockett was unraveling in real time, like a cable news segment that starts with breaking and ends with yikes. "Let's talk about January 6th, Pam," Crockett barked. "Where were you when your people at your MAGA cult smeared on the walls of this building? You weren't outraged then. You didn't ask about moral responsibility then. But I make a joke about Elon Musk, and suddenly it's a federal case. Spare me." She turned to the rest of the committee now, eyes wide, desperate to find allies in the woodwork. "And y'all don't sit there acting like I'm crazy. You know exactly what this is. Fox News has been running segments on me for weeks. Laura Loomer's out there live tweeting my bathroom schedule. I'm not paranoid. I'm targeted, a Republican." Congressman leaned into his mic dry as Nevada asphalt. "You've said a lot of things, Congresswoman, none of them helpful." That didn't stop her. She pivoted back to Bondi, who still hadn't moved an inch. "Why won't you answer me, huh? Scared? Or just too cold to care? Is this what passes for courage in your world, hiding behind paperwork and privilege, while people like me get crucified for speaking truth?" Pam finally raised her gaze, not her voice, not her hand, just her gaze, and it hit harder than shouting ever could. "Congresswoman," she said, voice low but razor sharp, "you're not being crucified, you're being confronted. There's a difference. And if you're so allergic to accountability, maybe don't use a public microphone like a Molotov cocktail." The room stiffened, but Bondi wasn't done. She leaned forward, every syllable as deliberate as a courtroom Oath you've insulted a senator, you mocked a governor in a wheelchair, you made a joke about a man's business burning down, and called it birthday humor, and now when the consequences come knocking, you shout racism MAGA in January 6th like it's a hall pass for bad behavior. Here's the truth: you're not under attack. Because of your color, you're under scrutiny. Because of your conduct, Crockett opened her mouth, but Pam raised a single finger. And don't you dare reduce legitimate questions to political persecution, because the moment we let people excuse incitement, threats, and abuse under the label of street talk or culture, we don't just degrade the system, we dishonor every American who plays by the rules and still gets overlooked. The chair cleared his throat. There was no need to bang the gavel, not yet. The words had done the job. Crockett's lip curled. You're good, Bondi, real slick, got your little lines memorized. You think I care what you say? Pam didn't answer. She didn't have to, because Crockett wasn't fighting back anymore. She was flailing, and the room could feel it. Even her allies stopped nodding, stopped shifting, stopped defending, because Crockett had just crossed the invisible line between passionate and petty, between politician and problem. And worse, she didn't even see it. Pam Bondi flipped to the final tab, and her folder. The room wasn't quiet. It was expectant, like a poker table where everyone knows one player still has an ace in hand. She tapped her mic. Mr. Chairman, with the committee's permission, I'd like to call one final witness. A slight ripple moved through the panel, heads turning, papers shifting, the scent of something inevitable in this air. The double doors at the back opened, and in walked Marcus J. Wells. No suit, no flash, just the navy blue uniform of the Capitol Police, a badge that caught the light, and the posture of a man who did not want to be here, but had something to say anyway. Bondi greeted him with a nod, no words, just wartime recognition. Wells stood at the witness stand, raised his hand, took the oath. Pam approached the mic slowly, deliberately. Officer Wells, can you state your role during the week of March 18th to March 25th? Assigned protective detail for Representative Jasmine Crockett, he replied, voice even, flat, not robotic, just careful. And in that time, did the Congresswoman ever express any wishes or remarks that in your judgment raise concern? There was a pause, not dramatic, just the kind people take when they know what they're about to say can't be unsaid. Wells looked directly at the committee. On the morning of March 24th, he began. While entering the Longworth building, Representative Crockett turned to me and said, quote, I want to see a few Teslas blow up today that would make my birthday worth it. He didn't stammer, he didn't exaggerate, he just delivered. The panel didn't gasp. They didn't need to, because truth doesn't need an applause track. Crockett didn't move, not a blink, not a twitch, not even a scoff, because this wasn't from her enemies, this wasn't doctored footage, this was her own bodyguard. Pam took a single step forward. Officer, are you confident in your memory of that statement? Crystal, he said, did you report it to anyone at the time? I documented it in my daily log, time-stamped. Verified it was passed to my superior 2 days later. Pam turned to the committee. The log is attached to Exhibit 9B, verified chain of custody filed prior to the Tesla fire. She said it without raising her voice. She didn't need to. It landed like an airstrike in slow motion across the room. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, but not still. Something inside her had shifted. Crack. She stared ahead, but her focus was gone. Not the firebrand anymore, not the fighter, just a woman trying to find any stable ground left under a narrative that had just gone up in smoke. Her lips twitched, perhaps searching for a rebuttal, a joke, a new villain to pin this on, but none came. Her fingers curled around her pen, knuckles white, as if clutching the last sliver of a script she no longer believed in. That's not what I said, she mumbled, not to the room, not to anyone, just to herself. But it was too late, because the sentence had already been etched into sworn testimony, and the timeline had already carved a path straight from her mouth to a burning Tesla facility. Pam watched her, not with glee, not even with triumph, but with the quiet finality of surgeons seeing the tumor they warned about finally take root. One committee member closed his laptop, another scribbled something on a yellow pad, probably just one word, done. Crockett blinked once, twice. She looked toward her legal advisor. No lifeline, just crossed arms and a carefully neutral face. The professional body language. We talked about this. You didn't listen. Her hands, once so animated, now lay folded like a flag after a failed campaign. And in that moment, she wasn't fiery. She wasn't defiant. She wasn't anything but small, the kind of small you become when the story you wrote about yourself gets redacted by reality. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to, because when a lie finally suffocates under the weight of its Own performance, no applause is necessary, just paperwork. The chairman removed his glasses, the universal signal that something unpleasant was about to be said, and officially recorded in light of the testimony presented and the corroborated documentation submitted. This committee hereby recommends a full ethics investigation into Representative Jasmine Crockett's conduct. Further, we advise the Department of Justice to evaluate for potential criminal liability related to incitement, obstruction, and violations of public trust. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't glare, he just said it and let the sentence do the sentencing. Crockett stood not like a warrior, not like a victim, but like a passenger who just realized the plane had landed in a country she didn't recognize, and the passport she brought was no longer valid. Her face, once an animated battlefield of bravado, had turned pale, not out of fear, but realization, the kind of realization that doesn't sting, it drains. She didn't say anything, which ironically was the first wise move she'd made in hours. Outside the chamber, the press was waiting, cameras pointed, lenses zoomed, mics cocked like rifles, but no one shouted her name, no one barked questions, because the silence that follows a scandal is worse than outrage. Outrage at least means you're still relevant. Pam Bondi rose quietly. She didn't straighten her blouse, she didn't scan the crowd, she didn't even look at Crockett. She simply gathered her full to the one that had gutted a political career and walked out like someone who came to work, not to war. And she didn't need to wait for applause. She'd brought receipts. By the next morning, the only thing left of Jasmine Crockett's once fiery narrative was ash, and not the symbolic kind. Cable news panels tore into the hearing like kids on Christmas clips, were dissected, reposted, slowed down, and mimified by breakfast. One anchor on News Nation dubbed it the implosion heard round the Beltway. Even MSNBC couldn't spin at one host side mid-broadcast and simply muttered this wasn't a takedown, it was a self-demolition. The New York Times gave it all of 800 words in a photo that looked like Crockett had just been asked to explain basic ethics and failed. The headline was clinical, almost bored. Crockett faces ethics probe following explosive hearing. Explosive, a clever choice of words considering the Tesla reference now stapled to her political obituary. But it wasn't just media fatigue that finished her off, it was the public, the very base she had built her brand on. Activists, influencers, academic grifters who loved a loud sound bite more than a sound argument suddenly forgot her name. Silence from the same people who once reposted her TikToks with fire emojis and called her the truth incarnate. And now they moved on to the next viral outrage, because martyrdom only works when the crowd still believes in your cause. And Jasmine Crockett had committed the one unforgivable sin in modern politics. She made it too easy to stop defending her at a smaller press gaggle near the Capitol steps. A rookie journalist with a lanyard too long and confidence too short raised a trembling hand. He didn't want to ask the question, but his editor made him. Ms. Bondi, he said, clearing his throat, with all due respect, how did you stay so calm? All those accusations, the insults, why didn't you hit back? Pam Bondi glanced at him, the kind of look you give someone who hasn't learned yet that not every war is won by shouting. Because I've seen people like her before, she said. Her voice wasn't cold, it was measured, which in Washington is far more dangerous. They build a brand off outrage. They sell victimhood like perfume, strong, artificial. And it fades by noon. And when they finally say too much, when the truth catches up to the lie, they always expect someone else to clean up the mess. She paused, letting that sink deeper than any headline. But I've learned something over the years. You don't have to expose people like Jasmine Crockett. You just give them a microphone and wait a reporter nearby whisper that's going viral. Pam didn't smile. She didn't need to, because the lesson had already been delivered, not by screaming, not by slander, but by letting Crockett be exactly who she really was, under oath, on record and out of runway. Evil doesn't always arrive with torches or banners. Sometimes it wraps itself in hashtags and designer victimhood, but it always slips eventually, because the truth isn't threatened by volume, it's revealed by repetition.